Fast.
Morales.
Raw.
Let's take the kidney out.
And we'd never seen anything quite like it. Tonight, the astonishing story behind a landmark show as ER celebrates its 200th episode. Made in TV heaven. Produced by Steven Spielberg and starring, well, this guy, for one.
Very handsome. He knows it.
It looked different. It sounded different.
It's like a widened mediastinum and a lot of the AP window.
And when they said, they really meant it. How could it lose? Well, it almost did. Too fast, too frenetic, they said. And there was another problem.
I was told that if you put George in a pilot, it won't sell.
Go figure. Tonight, the faces we know so well.
I don't make mistakes. Never have. Dr. Keaton's Adam.
Pulse ox dropped 84. Hey.
The moments we would never see. And a page from real life. A viewer who says ER saved her life.
I gave all the credit to ER.
Just clear.
From the cast and creators, the show that changed television. ER 200, a Dateline special, after this brief message. And now, ER 200, tonight's Dateline special. Here is Stone Phillips.
Good evening. What is quality television? Do you know it when you see it? A lot of shows are popular, but how many really meet your highest standard or set a new one? On every network, there are the few, the proud, the memorable. This week, NBC celebrates one of its own. On Thursday, ER reaches a new milestone, marking its 200th episode, a rare event in television. Tonight, a behind-the-scenes look at the cast and creators sharing their fondest memories, their funniest outtakes, and a few secrets about how this program got on the air. And that's where we begin, with the birth of ER, and how NBC executives didn't seem to know quality when they first saw it, in this case.
How many fingers do I have?
No veo nada.
Have the bypass packages standing by. Set planning.
This is my ER now!
Save my voice.
It's a kaleidoscope of critical care. Fast turns, shifting scenes, straightaway drama.
Why is he still screaming?
I don't know.
It was really like stepping on a moving train. I mean, a fast-moving train.
But 200 clear.
Yes. Come back here and finish the workup.
No, thank you.
Gritty and raw.
It's like you can't hide from this stuff.
I feel totally sick.
And most of all, very real.
I'm afraid your daughter died this morning.
Oh my God. And you're dealing with the great themes of death and birth and sickness and disease.
For 200 episodes now, 200 Thursday nights, ER has brought the pulse and panic of a big city emergency room right into millions of living rooms. It has changed the pace and look of TV, set a new standard for realism, and helped push all hour-long dramas into more closely reflecting everyday life.
These are stories pulled from real life, so it's not as if it's just, all fantasy and imagination.
So the biggest surprise about this unpredictable show may be that it took 20 years to get made. ER might as well have stood for eerie reminder that in the formula-driven world of television, a new and challenging idea can get stuck in the waiting room.
The network really didn't want to put us on the air.
For the first time ever, the three creators of ER sat down together to tell us the story of the hit that almost wasn't. Writers Michael Crichton and John Wells, and director Steven Spielberg.
Three big names, how a network couldn't say, green light, bless it, hands off, do your thing. We're with you. We trust you.
It's amazing, isn't it? That's how it always goes, isn't it?
On television, all the networks think they're the 1,000-pound gorillas, and they only treat us like these 700-pound gorillas.
Think of the original ER script as their patient, one that had to take a long trip through a big city hospital. It all started in the newborn unit with a Harvard medical student in the late 1960s named Michael Crichton. He was doing his student rotation at a Boston emergency room
What was it about the reality of the emergency room that drew you to it?
The complexity and the sort of overlapping quality of, one minute it's very funny, the next minute it's very sad.
Crichton wrote a book about his ER experience entitled 5 Patients. Soon he was writing other books, novels, to help pay for school. Several became bestsellers, then hit movies. So instead of a career in medicine, Crichton stuck with writing. But he never forgot the ER. In 1974, Crichton was already one of the top fiction writers of his generation when he sat down and wrote this movie screenplay, EW, for Emergency Ward, the common name for ERs back then.
When you started shopping the screenplay around, what was the reaction?
At first there was a lot of interest, and then people began to get scared because it seemed very technical, because it seemed to go awfully fast.
The script had 85 scenes and more than 100 speaking parts, all jammed with medical talk and the frantic feel of a real ER. Despite Crichton's incredible track record as a writer, this screenplay was too much for Hollywood. EW slipped into long-term care. Crichton shopped it around for years with no luck. Then in the late 80s, he gave the script to Hollywood's reigning king of blockbuster movies, director Steven Spielberg.
It was like an action film with character, not with guns or car chases or anything else, but it was all action oriented.
And you bought the screenplay?
I bought the screenplay, yeah.
After 15 years, Crichton's movie script, now retitled ER, was finally about to get made. Or was it?
Michael told you about another little project he was working on.
Yeah, it was a great mistake that he made.
Spielberg says one day he happened to ask Crichton what else he was working on. After some arm twisting, he got an answer.
Look, I can't tell you in detail what I'm doing. I can only tell you, as my friend, that I'm writing a novel about DNA and dinosaurs. And all of a sudden, ER became a thing of the recent, immediate past.
Enough about these dying people.
Yeah.
Give me dinosaurs, DNA.
And these overworked, physicians and interns.
ER went back into long-term care. And Jurassic Park was born. $300 million box office dollars later, in 1993, Spielberg finally turned his attention back to ER, this time thinking it could be a TV series.
It was very different than what anybody else was doing on television or suggesting doing on television.
Writer-producer John Wells, who'd worked on the series China Beach, set in a military hospital in Vietnam, was brought on board. He loved the script, but wasn't sure any network would.
Were you concerned commercially that you'd be able to get it done, be able to get the support, get a network behind it?
I think we sort of assumed we weren't. Honestly, it's so difficult in everything to actually get something made.
Yeah.
Particularly something that's unusual.
He's a bright boy, Mr. Stinson. You ought to be proud of him. Is he going to live, Doctor?
Remember, over the years, most medical dramas followed a well-worn TV formula. Shows like Ben Casey in the early 1960s and Marcus Welby, MD, in the 70s presented doctors as godlike figures in white coats. In the 1980s, St. Elsewhere began to move away from that with an offbeat, more irreverent look at medicine.
Here we go. Just watch your spear.
But Crichton wanted ER's doctors to break the mold completely.
Overworked, stressed out, struggling to somehow get through these 12, 14-hour shifts.
Yeah, and I always saw them as genuine modern-day heroes. They are.
But even these 3 big names, teamed up with Warner Brothers Studio, still had to push and prod. They finally got NBC to at least approve shooting Crichton's script as a TV pilot, a sample of what a series might be. In early 1994, 20 years after EW was first written, casting for the pilot began. Crichton's patient, his script, had now moved into intensive care. The first hire for this risky project was a risk himself, a struggling actor with a streak of bad luck named George Clooney.
I was told that there's almost a guarantee that if you put George in a pilot, it won't sell. George had been attached to 6 or 7 pilots that didn't sell.
Who is this person?
Including a sitcom that was called ER.
You do a lot of shows, and truly, in general, the best pilots you do don't get picked up.
Would this ER suffer the same Clooney fate? As the pilot's cast came together, no one was very confident.
Action, Noah!
Noah Wiley got the role of medical student John Carter.
I really thought the show would go 6 or 7 episodes and be canceled, and I figured I would take the money and run and do something else.
Anthony Edwards was cast as Dr. Mark Green.
Upon first reading it, I knew it was something special. Whether some people are going to love it or not, you don't know.
Sherry Stringfield became Dr. Susan Lewis.
There was certainly that kind of attitude, like, what are they doing? And they're taking this huge risk with saying the real, medical jargon and in real time or even faster.
Shooting on ER had begun, but even after 2 decades of roadblocks, the biggest problems were yet to come.
When we return, why the show that made history almost never made it at all.
They said they thought it was too frenetic, too fast-paced, and they didn't understand half the dialogue.
And later in the show, golden moments never meant for prime time.
Today you brought a dime woman into this ER, and you got in the way of everyone's work. And I love you.
When ER 200, our Dateline special, continues.
There's a saying among salespeople, the selling begins when the customer says no. That was certainly true of ER. Looking back on it today, it's hard to imagine any network not buying a show starring George Clooney, script by Michael Crichton, and among the producers, another pretty well-known name, Steven Spielberg. You'd buy it, wouldn't you? Well, you'll be surprised what a hard sell it was.
Hard. Action! All right, people, let's bring them in. Come on.
It's day 1 in the ER.
On 3, are we ready? 1, 2, 3.
You're looking at early takes of the first scenes ever shot for the show, back in March of 1994.
Don't worry, everything will be fine.
There was no money for a set, so the pilot was filmed at this shut-down hospital in East Los Angeles.
Hey, a lot of activity now, a lot of activity. Action, 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 come on.
Right from the start, the frantic pace of Crichton's script was proving hard to capture. For one thing, all that medical dialogue
Let's have a CBC type and cross-match. Sent, notify the OR, get us a room.
Was driving the actors crazy.
Mr. Wilson, can you...
Just take that right again. Take it right again. And action. Mr. Wilson.
They actually thought we were doing it on purpose just to torture them. And there were a lot of accusations that went back and forth about it, and a lot of takes.
It was a lot of mumbo-jumbo. You couldn't really understand a lot of what the guys were talking about.
We say dialogue that we do not understand and have to understand by the time we shoot. And we have to say it as if we said it 1,000 times and it's second nature to us.
Okay, what do we got here? Where are the paramedics? Get his clothes off of him.
Crichton says he also had to teach the cast to behave like real ER doctors.
They would be looking at the patients' faces and talking to them.
We'll give you something for the pain. Just hang in there.
And I kept saying to John, no, they've got to look at the wound, you know. They don't, and some...
Actors look at the faces, doctors look at the wounds.
Background. Action.
Everybody gets an IV the minute they come through the door. Use an angiocath with a 16 needle. You need a large...
Shoots for many scenes dragged on and on. Here, Eric LaSalle takes Noah Wiley on a fast-talking tour of the ER for 5 pages of uninterrupted monologue.
Okay, your room will be down here. That's where you'll sew people up. Do you know how to suture? Okay?
I could not hesitate. I could not pause. I couldn't say,
The scene of Eric LaSalle and Noah Wiley, that first introduction to the ER. 24 takes, is that right?
It was 22 till we got it right, and then 2 more to make sure that we had it.
Okay, here's the suture room. Let's see.
God, Fred.
I'm a little under the weather.
Then, to top it off, George Clooney actually had trouble with his opening scene.
How's Jennifer? How's your beautiful wife?
She's fine.
You too.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
Do it again. I'll be fine.
I've heard that he had no idea how to play a drunk.
He claimed he had no idea how to play a drunk.
Sure enough, Clooney started to get the idea.
Okay.
And after a few takes, he hit the right note.
Oh, Danny boy. The pipes, the pipes. Ow. Oh, yeah. Okay. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this, Mark.
But all of these problems beg the question, had the Hollywood suits, the industry doubters, been right these last 20 years? Was Crichton's script, with all of those scenes and characters, just too tough to actually make? Was the chaos just part of the creative process, or cause for concern?
There had never been anything like that on television. And you're, the whole time you're going, what's going on? What's going on?
For me, that's just standard op. When you're making a movie or a TV show, you just get used to seeing all the mistakes, and you keep hoping they'll get funnier and funnier, so you've got an outtake reel to throw at the rap party.
Bye.
Then, bit by bit, he says, it all began to click.
When the director said action, you really felt that you were in the middle of a war zone.
Action!
When it came together, you would always know what take it was coming together on.
Room 7.
By the time the pilot was finally done, everyone felt this just might work as a series.
Print that one.
But when NBC network executives looked at ER, they weren't exactly in a hurry to talk about it.
They kept us waiting for about an hour and a half, and finally came in very, eyes downcast, very sad, and said, guys, there's really no point in us giving you any notes because we really don't like the show. It's not going to make the schedule.
Spielberg was out of town when he got a call from one of his executives.
They thought it was too frenetic and too fast-paced, and they didn't understand half the dialogue, and they want you to slow down and make eye contact. Stop looking at the moon, so to speak.
How frustrating was that to you, Michael?
I didn't expect that it would be as bad as it was. I was also out of town. I mean, we let John go.
You were the guy, huh? Yeah. With friends like these,
ER was headed for the trauma unit, showing few signs of life. But Warner Brothers, the studio that financed the show, did a test screening of ER for an audience of regular viewers. It got the highest test numbers the studio had ever seen. NBC didn't believe it.
They tested it the next day at NBC themselves, and it tested better the next day.
What's up with these NBC television executives?
Everybody who didn't want ER on the air is no longer with NBC, I believe. I don't think any of them are with the network anymore. But not because of this, but they just happen not to be here.
Clear.
With those big audience test scores, ER was headed for full recovery. NBC finally climbed on board and gave the show a green light for the fall season. The pilot debuted as a 2-hour special on September 19th, 1994. By mid-season, ER was the #1 show on television.
Hey, let's get back to work!
We'll set up in the OR. Have the bypass passengers standing by.
200 episodes later, ER is still alive and kicking.
Okay, guys, let's get ready for rehearsal, please.
While we were there visiting, John Wells showed everyone a new set, a hospital in Africa, built for the season finale later this month.
How many episodes is this going to cover?
It'll cover 2 right now, and then there'll probably be another next year.
They met up with Noah Wiley, the only cast member to be part of all 200 episodes.
It's fun to go back and talk about it again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's a little disconcerting.
It's the longest relationship of my life.
Even on this new set, the feel was pure ER, frenetic, crowded, and very real. All the same elements that kept this show on the shelf for 20 years and almost kept it off the air.
Is there a moral here for television executives?
Well, I think there's a moral for all of us that none of us know anything. Right. Everybody thinks we have a crystal ball. There's no such thing. You just have to always fly by the seat of your pants and do the best work you think you can do, and then everything else is a mystery.
Well, some other writer once said, all's well that ends well, Michael.
That's true, yes.
Well, let's hope this never ends.
Coming up, they strive for entertainment and for authenticity. And that, she says, is what saved her life.
I finished my radiation in May and had my last treatment of chemo in September.
A warning sign from ER made her take some action. Plus,
The offer you made today, were you serious?
scenes you weren't meant to see. When ER 200, our Dateline special, continues.
Keep it real. That's been doctor's orders on every episode of ER. Michael Crichton insisted all along that this television drama portray medicine as realistically as possible. How do they do it? We're about to show you. You'll also meet a young woman who says what she learned by watching ER helped save her life. Here's Keith Morrison.
Don't touch it, it hurts! Unlike any medical TV show that came before, ER from the start has gone to great lengths to have the kind of medicine that, until its premiere, had only been seen in documentaries.
Mets to divide the vessels.
With doctors on the writing team and more doctors on the set, the research and reshooting makes it as real as possible. How real?
Unit number 6 is going up. I love that show. I watch it every week.
Angie Cooper is a mother of 2 in Edwood, Texas, who never misses an episode. Late last year, she began to feel strange. She had headaches.
It was just burn. I don't know how to describe the burn, but it was just a constant numbing burning.
Meanwhile, the writers on ER were trying to come up with a way to demonstrate that after surviving his battle with brain cancer, Anthony Edwards' character, Dr. Mark Green, was showing symptoms again. His cancer was coming back.
So I thought about the neuroanatomy, I thought about where the tumor was, I thought about what a little growth could do. And one of the things that that tumor could have knocked out was the nerve that controls your tongue.
Dr. Joe Sachs is a writer and supervising producer on the show. Still an attending physician in a real ER, he also has his master's in filmmaking.
Action! So the story that I came up with was that Green is talking to Lewis about something trivial, and he bites his tongue.
You did a really good job.
And he says, oh, I bit my tongue. And she goes, let me see.
Let me see.
He sticks his tongue out, but when he sticks his tongue out, it deviates to one side.
Tongue out. You put it on the right side. I can't see when you do that.
She says, no, stick it out straight. I can't see that side. And he says, I am sticking it out straight. And the look on Lewis's face, she knows. She knows that the tumor is back.
Back in Texas, Angie Cooper was watching the show, growing more suspicious of her headaches and pains. She decided to take the tongue test, and she failed, and went to the ER and did it for the doctors there.
And he went to the side. He goes, okay. So then they did the test. I got an MRI and a CAT scan, and they found a tumor behind my sinus cavity.
Her doctors were shocked. Angie had a rare form of brain cancer, so rare, it's usually caught too late. She was immediately started on chemotherapy and radiation. We'll tell what the next few months were like for Angie, but first you should know hers is not the only story like that. Real people are constantly learning about real medicine by watching ER. There is, among the doctors on the staff of this fictional ER, a deep-seated passion about getting the real medicine right. To ensure that ER is as accurate as possible, each year the show invites local ER nurses in to talk about their jobs.
Nurses Night is just a chance for nurses to come in and talk to us about what's going on and what interesting cases they've seen.
And for the writers who aren't real doctors, there are field trips to real ERs to observe.
How did you swallow a quarter? Was it in like a hamburger or something?
Then, once the shooting starts on the ER set, real emergency room doctors are there as technical advisors to make sure the medicine is as accurate as possible. Executive producer Jack Orman.
Ready and action. Before we shoot the scene, before the director even comes on and starts rehearsing, the technical advisor will walk through what's called a technical rehearsal with the actors. On the other hand, you'll be steering the gurney.
They very meticulously map out all the scenes, and when we get in the room, they go over the material with us and teach us how to do the procedures. Now, shall I hold it up this way or this way?
We used to rehearse each trauma scene for close to 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We do them in 10 minutes now. And that's the difference, that everybody really knows what they're doing.
O2 15 liters.
Then they sit behind the director and make sure the actors are completing the procedures correctly. And, of course, using the right words and saying them correctly.
So with the chest.
I had to say methylprednisolone and sternocleidomastoid.
Entry wound, left mid-sternocleidomastoid with a large hematoma.
It took me forever. I kept getting it wrong, and particularly sternocleidomastoid in the end.
I had the director and the producer and all of the actors. They were all going around dancing, going sternocleidomastoid, sternocleidomastoid, just to do anything to get me to understand that word. And now I got it. Now I can't get it out of my system.
What I usually do is have little word games in my mind. Like one time I had to say meningioencephalomyelopathy. And I went through this whole thing where I said, okay, menin, that's a kind of deodorant. And I had this whole thing in my mind like somebody has to put on deodorant because they're getting into this little car at Geo and they're going to elope. And so I had this whole meningioencephalomyelopathy. Just little word games, stuff like that.
So just how convincing are the ER actors? Well, Maura Tierney, who plays Nurse Abby, says after a few years on the show, her husband got sick.
I diagnosed my husband's appendicitis. And he looked at me and said, "Get your hands off me, you're not a real nurse."
He went to the hospital anyway, and Maura was right. It was appendicitis. And the nurse at the hospital even let Maura help her take her husband's blood.
My husband's sort of out of it, and he opened up his eyes, and I'm standing there with the nurse. And I said, "Check me out, I'm helping the nurse." And he said, "Oh my God," and like passed out again.
BP Spali, 70 systolic.
Keep squeezing that back.
There is, however, one thing that's very unreal about all this. In TV, time has to shrink.
A procedure that normally takes 15 minutes to do might only take 45 seconds to do in the trauma room on ER.
Let's go, grab the slider. 150. Charge.
After all, it's only an hour. And a lot happens in an hour on Thursday nights.
For THI cannula.
It's got to be fast, no matter how real it may be.
There's really a lot going on.
These breath sounds bilaterally.
Sometimes you're like, this is dangerous. And you're running down the hallway and you're like, God, I wish they'd moved that table over there, and you get like a hip check or something. You kind of worry about that stuff. And then you're like, oh, my lines.
The story has to keep moving. It is, after all, entertainment.
Why am I not exploding?
But while we were there visiting, the ER staff learned what they do is also much more. They got a letter from Edgewood, Texas, from Angie Cooper. Remember her? For 7 months, she went through painful chemotherapy and radiation on her rare tumor. Doctors hoped they had caught it early. And they did. All because Angie was watching ER that night 15 months ago and realized something was wrong.
It's not so bad. Just keep applying. I finished my radiation in May and had my last treatment of chemo in September. I gave all the credit to ER because I would have died from it.
After finishing her treatments and sure the show had saved her life, Angie Cooper sent that letter to the people at ER. It wound up on the desk of Joe Sachs, a doctor, now a TV writer, but still a doctor.
And she wrote us a lovely, lovely letter. And her P.S. to us is, "I hate that Mark is gone. I miss him, but because of his death, I'm alive."
Coming up next, it looks so real, it hurts. Just ask the guy on the gurney.
A little warning to all the actors out there. Never play patient on ER.
How to fake it. A jungle guide to ER's medicine. Plus, scenes you weren't meant to see. When ER 200, our Dateline special, continues.
Each week, it's a delicate operation. We've seen how careful the ER team is when it comes to medical facts. But it's still television. Patients aren't really bleeding. Wounds aren't actually being sewn up. Life-saving surgeries are not being performed. So how do they make it look so real? Once again, Keith Morrison.
You talked 4 times for BFib.
Hold compressions.
This man doesn't really have a gunshot wound. He's not really dying. He's just faking it for the cameras. But in Hollywood, this is actually a good gig, getting your face on ER, even if it is covered in blood. It looks like easy work, doesn't it? But no, this has become the one place in town where you can't just play dead. even if you are playing dead.
I want you to stay awake, John. You stay awake until you get up there. You hear me?
I was a patient once. It's a vulnerable place to be. You're stripped to the waist, and people are standing over you, and they're pushing you, and they're prodding you, and they're poking you, and they're jabbing you.
John?
When you get cardioverted or defibrillated, you have to jump. We have to teach them how to jump.
Dr. Fred Einsman is a real ER doctor and also a technical advisor on the set of ER.
We're going to have an entrance wound here and an entrance wound there. Okay. And we're going to have blood splattered all here.
He is part of the technical team at ER that's pioneered the use of state-of-the-art makeup and props and prosthetics, raising the bar for what audiences now expect to see in television drama. The team ensures that all those injured actors rushed in on gurneys really do look like their lives hang in the balance. Actor Upinder Bansal plays a man shot, a victim of a hate crime.
It's kind of surprising that there's so much involved in playing dead.
But I really want him blooded.
I'm technically dead because I'm brain dead. There may be some life in me. That's the story, you know.
Hold compressions.
Casting directors just picked him from a photograph. No complicated audition needed. He doesn't even have to hold his breath.
When he's pushing me, my body's going to go up and down anyway.
Some jerk shot him 3 times because he wouldn't get off the bus.
A little warning to all the actors out there. Never play a patient on ER. I mean, sometimes they're lying there for 4 hours. And we're like, you know, listening to their lungs, you know. Okay, we're just going to pretend to shove this down your throat, you know. You can see their face. They're like, oh, my God.
Guess we're ready.
It looks cool.
Meanwhile, just down the hall from this scene, another operation is being prepped.
Clone pupil?
Subconscious hemorrhage. The story's about a young girl who's been beaten and who's come into the ER with a bruise around her eye. And then, suddenly, she starts to go blind. Writer and real-life doctor Joe Sachs.
They're bleeding behind their eye. The blood is accumulating, doesn't have anywhere to go, so it's compressing their optic nerve and they're going blind.
Can't see. Why can't I see? Hold still.
But showing that injury, showing it realistically in the ER way, is not simple. For example, you can't just put a drop of fake blood in the eye because it won't stay there.
So we actually fitted this girl for a contact lens that made it look like she was really badly beaten up.
You can't see because there's blood collecting behind your eye. We're going to have to drain it.
In the episode, Alex Kingston's Dr. Corday has to perform surgery on the eye, and because it's ER, it means they're going to show surgery.
How do you make it look so real when it's so fake?
Well, I asked them to build a prosthetic eye because I knew we wanted to zoom in close on the procedure. So we have a fake eye, we have skin overlying it that we're able to cut. And while you're cutting the skin, that eye's got to move because this little girl's on the table freaking out. No, don't do it, please, please, I don't want you to cut my eye.
Cut my eye.
So her eye's kind of darting around. So there was a cable-rigged prosthetic eye that the prop department could move around. As they cut, the special effects department was under the table with a little syringe full of blood so blood would trickle out. So it's a collaboration between all the departments.
The prop department at ER, a virtual factory for body parts. Of course, those aren't human organs, but they aren't always plastic either, because, as prop person Mark Verduzzo, they just can't look fake. And so, often, they're real.
We use pig organs when we have to actually remove it and hold it in the hand, because pig organs are very close in size and color and shape to human organs.
As for the truly fake body parts...
And we do prosthetics all the time. By using the prosthetic, we can actually do the surgery and show it on camera. We're trying to be as realistic as possible. You can't do that with the actors, so by using the prosthetics, we can show things that otherwise you'd never get to see.
There is, however, as you can imagine, one commodity that never stops flowing around here. Blood. In the ER, there is always blood. 5 different kinds of blood, actually. Each one a carefully crafted counterfeit. And if the fake blood isn't enough for, say, childbirth...
And when we have experimented with a few different things, we finally came upon vanilla yogurt and cherry jam. We tried cherry yogurt, but it didn't quite look right.
to your daughter.
Somewhere in the blend of real and fake and the specks of cherry jam, the whole thing conjures up magic. Despite doctors' best efforts, for actors who come through the set each week, this ER is in some ways a lot like Hollywood. Not everyone makes it. For actor Upender Bansal, his long day drenched in fake blood, pushed around on a gurney, ended like this.
Call it. Time of death, 1343.
Though there is, of course, an upside. After the blood, the lights, the waiting, the death. At the end of the day, an ER patient gets up and happily walks off, assuming that his agent has another job lined up.
Earlier in this hour, Steven Spielberg laughed about all the mistakes during the making of the pilot for ER. He said he just hoped they'd be funny enough for a good blooper reel. Well, here now, a look at some ER scenes that weren't quite ready for prime time. After 9 years and 200 episodes, there was more than a little to choose from.
Pressure's down to 90. Set me up for a central line.
When lives are on the line,
12 segment, 32 French.
every move, every minute counts.
I think it's in VTech.
Clear.
One mistake, or two, or three, can lead to serious complications. Okay, so they're not that serious. In fact, in this ER, there's plenty of time to fool around and make mistakes.
You know, if you do this, you're going to set off the... Are we rolling? Yes. Oh.
As you'll see from these favorite outtakes of the show, selected by ER's cast and crew.
Fabian? Got it. Pressure's down to 70, pulse ox dropped to 84. Okay.
We're laughing all the time because it really helps to dissipate the tension.
You see, it's not easy saving lives, even on TV. First, there are those tricky rubber surgical gloves.
Sorry. How tricky those gloves.
Then, of course, there's all that serious, fast-paced dialogue.
Foley, UA with dip and icon, too. Multiple GSW coming in.
10 days of doxycycline and stellar to teafea. Nada más ahí.
I mean, we have fun, but you really have to hone your concentration skills.
Be careful, Abby. Make sure. Use the force. Be careful, Abby. Make sure. I don't make mistakes. Never have. It's one of the interesting trivia questions. Who's never made a mistake in 9 years? Me. 2-year-old man with a history of calcium oxalate stones, intravision of pyelogram. 52-year-old man with a history of calcium oxalate stones. I'm sorry. Pyelogram showed a 6mm kidney stone in the cat is constructive. So close.
Okay, on my count.
The cast knows that top-notch doctors need to be focused and fully capable of coming up with the right answer.
What do you see?
Well, I don't know. I just see an X-ray and some white stuff.
So we looked at your CT. There's no evidence of really anything. There's actually nothing in your head at all.
I'm controlling the bleeder.
We'll put a pressure dressing on it.
Pressure dressing.
In this struggle to jumpstart a heart attack victim, Alex Kingston suddenly forgets what to do with the electroshock paddles.
Come on, I didn't just get sprayed for nothing. Finish.
Wow. Oh, okay.
Damn it, say paddles.
Clear.
That is none of anybody's business. I'm a doctor.
Amidst all the medical tension, everyone understands doctors do have a tender side.
Today, you brought a dying woman into this ER, and you got in the way of everyone's work. But I love you.
Were you serious?
What?
The offer you made today. Were you serious?
Yes, hey.
What's fun about Alex is if you do something a little off just for fun, she just gets completely flummoxed and doesn't know what to do. And oh, stop!
I was so shocked. I wasn't expecting you to do that.
Next time we need to know something, I guess we'll just ask maintenance.
For practical jokes, no one did it better than George Clooney in his 5 seasons with the show.
I'm sorry.
How many times have I asked you to get this body to the morgue?
I will call them again.
No,
Here, the cast does take one of a surprise party scene.
Again, it's just a corpse. It's not like you've never seen a dead body before.
That becomes a real surprise in take 2, thanks to George.
Not like you've never seen a dead body before.
I'm hearing basal rolls on the
And
left.
here, Clooney pretends to forget his lines and asks Juliana Margulies to get his script pages out of a drawer.
See blood. Will you hand me my size for a second, real quick?
Where, just out of camera range, he's hidden a very real-looking rubber snake.
Hufnagel? Field looks dry.
Sure, it looks smooth every Thursday night, but remember all that fast talking.
Okay, let's irrigate warm saline, please.
Dr. Keaton's Elmer
Fudd just came in here.
And all that fast walking aren't always that easy.
Total communication, more like
Sorry.
200 episodes. And now maybe at long last, ER the movie. I asked Steven Spielberg if he would still be interested in making the film version of ER that he started working on back in the late 1980s, before it was turned into a television series. He told me lately he has been thinking of dusting off his copy of the original screenplay and seeing if he might want to take a crack at directing it. Almost 30 years after Michael Crichton first came up with the script. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you again for Dateline Wednesday at 8, 7 Central. Now stay tuned for your late local news. I'm Stone Phillips. Good night.
Later on The Tonight Show, a acerbic repartee with Dennis Miller, and Jay is reunited with X2's Famke Janssen, plus tunes from Fabulous featuring Little Mo. Your local news is next.
Now, NBC 739 News at 11.